Hi, Dr. Howard. I did my research project on who sits alone in the cafeteria more, men or women. This right here is my poster, but kind of to start off, I'm gonna read all of the little parts, the intro, the literature reviews, the summaries, the results, the methodology, the further work, and then also the conclusion. But also after that, I'm gonna kind of talk about my experience and my personal views of all of these things. But to get started, the intro. Many students eat in the den, but not everyone has the same experience. Some students sit with friends while others sit alone. Sitting alone can be caused by many things like feeling left out or just wanting quiet time. One thing that might affect this is gender. There isn't much research on how gender changes the way students sit in shared spaces like cafeteria. Learning more about this can help schools make the cafeteria a more welcoming place for everyone. This project is trying to find out if boys or girls are more likely to sit alone in the den. I watched students during breakfast, lunch, and dinner, counted how many people were there, and noted who was sitting alone, what gender they were, and where they sat. I also looked at other things like whether they played sports. The main goal is to see if there is a pattern in who sits alone based on gender. This study could help schools better understand students' behavior and make the cafeteria a more comfortable place for all students. Okay, and what sparked this idea was I tended to notice that I would sit alone quite a lot at the den, and there were many other factors, but I wanted to know if other people, thought I was alone or I didn't have many friends or anything like that. So I wanted to kind of zoom out and see for myself if people sat at the den because they're lonely or just kind of observe their interactions at the den if they were by themselves or with people as well. Okay, and I reviewed 5 different scholarly journals or research papers, and I'll just give a little of each one. So the first one was called Eating Out Alone, and this just looks at how people feel about eating alone in restaurants. Lots of people feel awkward or judged, especially at first when they're not used to it. And then through many interviews, the study shows that over time, some feel more confident. It also finds that culture and gender affect these feelings and call for more acceptance of eating alone. I think this article was definitely calling out, it should be normalized for people to sit alone, and that's what I liked about it, and I thought that correlated with college students, especially trying to be different and trying to do their own thing. The second one was called Why Not Eat Alone? The Effect of Other Consumers on Solo Dining Interactions and Mechanisms. This one study shows how presence of others affect people's willingness to dine alone in restaurants. So this means if it's a certain time at night that not many people go to, or if there's a bunch of people and it's packed. They find that solo diners feel judged, reducing their intentions to eat out alone. The study shows that social discomfort and fear of negative evaluations are key reasons behind this hesitation, and people are just kind of thinking of the other world and other people's perceptions on them. The third is gender differences in sitting positions of college students and explanations of these differences. This looks at how males and female college students sit differently. They found that men and women often choose different sitting positions because of comfort and social expectations. The study shows these habits are linked to common ideas about how each gender is supposed to act. And this is if you're taking up a bunch of space or you're kind of closed to yourself. Anyways, I really liked that article. That was very interesting to me. The fourth is Older Adults in Public Open Spaces, Age and Gender Segregation. This one just studied how older adults interacted outside in nature, I guess. They studied people at playgrounds or dog parks or things like that, and I thought that was really interesting. The fifth one is called Where Would We Sit? Identifying gender seating positions in public spaces. And this one looks at how men and women pick seats in public places, and the study found that women often choose seats where they feel safe and can see others, while men are more focused on comfort. This shows that public spaces should be designed to make everyone feel safe and comfortable. Yeah, this one shocked me. I didn't even realize, but I do this too. Like at a movie theater, if I'm sitting by myself, I want to be at the back row so I know no one's behind me. And I remember even when I was with people, I would tend to feel uncomfortable when we were more in the middle row, and I knew that people were behind me, which is just fascinating. Okay, so those are my 5 articles. Okay, this is just a summary of the project. This project looks at which gender is more likely to sit alone in the school cafeteria, called the den. The goal was to understand if boys or girls sit alone more often and where they chose to sit. To do this, I watched the den during breakfast, lunch, and dinner and wrote down how many people were there who were sitting alone, their gender, where they were sitting, and if they played a sport. The main focus was gender, but I also noted other details to help understand the patterns. The results showed the boys were more likely to sit alone than the girls, especially during breakfast, and people who sat alone usually picked spots on the edge of the cafeterias where it was quieter or less crowded. Students who played a sport were less likely to sit alone, which is something else that I noticed. This changed depending on the time of day. Overall, the students show that gender affects who sits alone, and things like time and location also play a factor. This information could help schools make cafeteria spaces more safe and inviting and enjoyable. The theory and methodology is what I did. To find out which gender is more likely to sit alone in the den, I used a method called observation. Basically, I did my best, but for 20 days, this is what my data says, or my results, data I found. I spent 20 days, either breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I tried doing 1 per day, so it would differ. But I would observe who was sitting alone, how many people were sitting alone, and if they were, men or female. I counted this, wrote it down. I obviously noted their gender, how they looked, like if they were comfortable, if they were sad, if they were tired, where they were sitting in the room, and if they seemed to be athletes, because this school has a lot of athletes. I chose this method because it shows real behavior in a normal setting, and I also wanted to just test my peers and see what they thought. I feel like it would be way different if I went to a whole other college or even a high school. I assumed I could usually tell someone's gender by appearance, and this is just an assumption, and that if someone was sitting alone, it reflected their choice or situation at the time. I also assumed that people who were wearing sports gear most likely played a sport. And these assumptions helped me organize my notes, but they obviously may not be perfect. Still, this method helped me notice general patterns and better understand how boys and girls use the cafeteria space differently. Okay, and then this is my results. I kind of said it in the summary though. The results of the study showed that more boys were sitting alone than girls, especially during breakfast. For example, one morning out of 15 students in the cafeteria, 5 students were sitting alone, and out of all those 5 students, 4 of them were boys and 1 of them were girls. This pattern was similar on other days as well, with boys often sitting alone more than girls. At lunch and dinner, fewer students were sitting alone, and I assume this is because more people go to dinner and more people are awake then. But again, it tended to be boys sitting by themselves. And that pattern continued. I noticed that students who sat alone preferred to sit at the edges or corners of the cafeteria, away from the busiest areas. For example, one boy sat in the far corner during lunch several times, and I noticed the student multiple days. Students sit in groups usually chose closer spots to the middle. Athletes were less likely to sit alone, though this wasn't always true. These results show how boys were more likely to sit alone, and how seating, location, and sports involvement might also play a role in this. And I'll do a little close-up. But this is the data. If you can see, the y-axis is 0 through 10, and the x is day 1 through day 20. So the boys and the girls, and you really notice a difference in this. And you can notice, you know, some days girls beat them, like these few days, like day 3, day 4, and day 17. But most of the other days, the boys outnumbered them, which was very cool. Okay. Oh, and this is also a picture of the den. So when I mean by people sat on the outsides, they sat over here because there's a wall back there, back by the window because they were facing the window, they weren't facing out, and over there as well. And these middle spots were most taken up by people who had people to sit by. And then that's just someone sitting alone, and that is a food plate. But that's just more of a close-up of my picture. Okay, so work further. This is just an idea of what we can do to help further this idea in research. To build on this study, future research could include surveys or short interviews with students to better understand why they chose to sit alone. This is something I would obviously assume. I would look at people and see how tired they were or if they seem sad, but these are obviously assumptions, so I can't be sure. This would help explain whether they feel lonely, enjoy quiet time, or are influenced by social pressure. It would also be helpful to include more detailed observations about age, grade level, or friendship group to see if these factors also play a role. And I also thought maybe location, how far away they are from home to this college could play a role in that too. Another way to improve this research would be to observe other shared spaces around campus, like study areas or lounges, to compare behavior in different settings. In addition, tracking seating habits over a longer period of time could show if patterns change during the school year. Meaning, like, you know, at the start of the school year, some people might not know as many people, so they might tend to go to the school cafeteria alone. And throughout the year, once they get more comfortable with their teammates or their roommates or people in their class, they would start sitting with them at lunch, dinner, or breakfast. Including more than one observer could also improve accuracy and reduce bias. Overall, these steps would give a better understanding of student behavior and help schools design more inclusive and comfortable spaces for everyone. I wanted to include the more than one observer because I tend to go to the den around a certain time every single day, and this could obviously change the patterns. I remember multiple times I would show up, write my data down, and right when I finished it, someone new would join or someone else would leave, like one of the people sitting alone. So I thought that would be different as well. Okay, so the conclusion is this study looked at which gender is more likely to sit alone in the school cafeteria. The main finding was that boys were more likely to sit alone than girls, especially during breakfast. I also found that students who sat alone often picked seats at the edges or corners of the cafeteria away from busy areas. Students who looked like athletes were a little less likely to sit alone, but this changed depending on the time. These results show that the gender, time of day, and where students sit in the room all affect who ends up sitting alone. Thank you. Oh, and these are my citations and references. Thank you.